Hi guys, hope you're well. I've got a really kind of superb guest today. I will introduce the chap in a second. But as I guess, a long-time basketball player myself, I've played all kind of around the UK and various different teams, various different cities. And throughout this whole kind of period, there's been one team in particular who's often been the kind of dominating force in British basketball. And actually, when I was lucky enough to move up to Newcastle, which is probably about 8 to 10 years ago now, I started to play for a local club. And it turns out there is a whole community foundation of not hundreds of teams, but a hell of a lot of teams, and there's a whole network of really kind of sporting kind of heritage in the northeast of England, especially around basketball. And right at the very top of it for almost everything is the Newcastle Eagles. And then throughout that kind of process, and also since I've kind of started working for myself, I've got to know the guys a bit more. And what I'm going to do is introduce Paul, and we'll have a bit of a chat. And what I'm keen to do is just share what I think is a genuinely great business, but it's a great sports team, it's a great night out, but also the kind of Eagles as a whole do a hell of a lot of really good stuff in the community as well, which I really want to try and dig into a little bit. And then likewise with the kind of growth strategy roadmap and kind of podcast, I like to also learn a bit more about the people behind the business as well and kind of talk it through. So Paul, I'm just going to bring you in. There we go. Would you like to say hello to everyone?
Yeah, hi everyone. Pleased to be here today to have a chat.
Fair enough. Cool. So we know each other through basketball related stuff. We almost played against each other at the Kobe Cup, which was back in February. But ironically, our two teams were in opposite sides of the draws, so we never ended up playing. Although Paul's team was much better than mine. We had myself and 4 people that had never played basketball before, but we still got through to the semis, so we did all right. But it was a really kind of good initiative, and it was, I know, sorry, we'll jump into it now. When I still remember initially, I was in the kitchen the day Kobe Bryant died, and for me, some people watching this will think this is stupid, but for me, it was quite a big deal. It was almost on par with when Princess Diana died. I remember when I was there as well, and it was when. Basically my wife came through and said Kobe Bryant's died, and I was like, what? And she said about the helicopter crash, and I remember that day constantly just checking Twitter because I didn't believe it. And it was, for me personally, because I'm that age group where he was my Michael Jordan, but actually since he kind of left basketball, the way he went on to business and the creative arts and doing all these things, and actually he was a very good family man as well by all kind of accounts, when it just impacted me on many different levels. And just before we go into some of the other kind of stuff, how did you experience the whole Kobe Bryant thing, and what does it mean to you? What do you think?
Yeah, it's just a huge shock, as it was for the whole basketball community, regardless. But obviously, it extended out from that because of his global reach. Just a real tragedy. But you say Kobe was your generation. My generation was Michael Jordan. So.
Well, I must admit, sorry, I'm just checking the live stream to actually mute it. Yes, it is working, so we're good. Have you watched The Last Dance at all on Netflix?
Yes.
I'm now 6 episodes in. Right. And actually, just as some storytelling, I think it's a fabulous kind of piece of kit. And actually, I always did have him as number one in terms of who I think is the best basketball player of all time. But something about Kobe resonated with me. I think because we're probably the same age as we were kind of going through. But it was just, anyway, we'll scrap that for now. But it was just because it came up. But it was, yes, we've never actually played against each other. But regardless. Sometimes. So would you like to kind of tell people about yourself and almost where you're from and how you kind of got started?
Yeah, sure. So where I'm from, I'm originally from Bristol. I moved up to the northeast way back in 1989, and that's the Jordan link. That's how old I am. Moved up to Newcastle in '89 to study at what was Newcastle Poly at the time, now Northumbria University. Studied sports studies, and then went back and did a master's degree in marketing a year or so after graduating from sports studies. Brief history. I was a lecturer following that for 2 years. On the sport management side of the sports studies set up at Northumbria. I helped to put together the master's degree in sport management in its very early days, and taught on that. And this is all while I was sort of 22, 23 years of age. So if I could take the experiences I've had since back into that environment, I'd probably have a few more case studies to tell than I did at the time. So yeah, did that for a couple of years. Moved into a small business, which is quite interesting in its own right, a sports video analysis business, predating the digital era. So this was all two videotapes and a piece of computer software that had come from Australia. A friend of mine had launched the business, but it engaged us with sports teams around the country, everyone from Graham Taylor while he was at Watford to David Lloyd in the England cricket team, Middlesbrough Football Club, Brian Robson and Viv Anderson. So it was a real interesting time for me, because I was having to pitch a product to my ultimate peers, people that I'd grown up watching and admiring as a youngster in their own sporting circles. Never forget the top day in that job was driving down the M1, actually to go and do a presentation to Graham Souness at Southampton, and Steve Coppell ringing me on the phone in the car, out of the blue, wanting to have an introduction of the product. And for me that was everything, because I am unfortunately for my sins, I'm a closet Man United fan. So Steve Coppell was one of my idols as a kid growing up playing football. But anyway, that was without going into too much detail, as I say, that took me out into more of a from what I was used to, more of an entrepreneurial world that sort of sparked my interest in the fact that this pal of mine had set this small business up and made it work, and how did he do that? Is this something that I'd like to do? It probably engaged me in understanding that I have an interest and a love for small business, being entrepreneurial, and not wanting to find my own path, if that's the right word. Yeah. So anyway, as luck may have it, I was then headhunted to the sporting club, Newcastle United Sporting Club, and it was a job I couldn't turn down. It was marketing manager for the Falcons, Eagles, and the Cobras ice hockey. But sadly, parted company with Ian, my boss and friend at the previous company. Started with the sporting club. Under the auspices of Newcastle United, the sporting club lasted for about 3 years. Didn't work for a variety of reasons, but it gave me an opportunity at the back end to look at taking on one of the clubs via a buyout. And that's ultimately what I did with my then boss, a chap called Ken Nottage, and the two of us as shareholders in what is now Newcastle Eagles Basketball. That was 1999. We fast forward 21 years in the same organisation, entrepreneurially.
Did you play basketball yourself?
I did, yeah. So part of the reason for moving up to Newcastle and studying at the Poly was it had a strong basketball program.
Still does.
Northeast, historically, basketball has been very, very strong, particularly at performance level. There's always been a history of National League clubs, whether it be in Newcastle or Sunderland, even Gateshead. Which wasn't the case in Bristol at the time. I mean, it's changed now, but those opportunities weren't there. So I kind of came up to study and play basketball.
So you're part of Newcastle United, who I guess, did you say that they had almost ownership of various teams, and then at a certain point that was kind of split off and you saw the opportunity to kind of take it and run with it?
Yeah, essentially. So Sir John Hall, it was Sir John's vision to have a sporting club and attach, a group of clubs to what already existed. The football ground was going through a development at the time, its final sort of build phase. There was talk for a while of getting planning permission to build an arena on the back of St James's Park at the Leazes End. Didn't come to fruition, and while that was happening, the Newcastle Arena project was off and running as well. So Sir John's vision was, obviously rugby team up at Kingston Park and the old what was Gossip Rugby Club, and to place an ice hockey and a basketball team in what was then the new Newcastle Arena.
It's interesting because I'm not from the region. This is all new to me, but it kind of all makes sense because people always joke about how small the Northeast is, and it's almost I get it, if that makes sense. So you find the opportunity to almost be part of a. Would you argue it's a startup business? It's, certainly like an early stage business. You then get the chance.
Possibly a step worse than a startup business. It was a failed business.
Okay. That's interesting. Before we go into it, just because again this is like a business related show, goes out on LinkedIn and stuff.
Yeah.
Why did the former organisation business fail?
Well, the three clubs all made losses. So John had invested in covering those losses, and to be honest, I mean, obviously they are only in, or were only in the city because of Sir John's vision, and two of the three have continued to exist because of the way that Sir John chose to exit. He didn't want the clubs to fold. He cleared the debts.
Okay. Because that was going to be my question. Was almost so to take an entity, but then with vision to think actually I can do something with this. I can make it work. So that sets us up quite nicely. So how would you then describe the next kind of 10 to arguably 20 years to go from that point where you almost had or you quite literally had ownership on a team, to then take it to where it is now?
So I could probably talk for 2 days about that, but
if you've got 7 or so minutes on it, it'd be brilliant.
So let's try and put it into context. So when I say it was a failed business, it was failed in the sense that it lost the 3 years it operated. It lost money each year, and Sir John ultimately invested in covering those losses. But for all intents and purposes, they weren't breaking even. So if Sir John's decision had to be, am I in this for the long haul? And equally, the other directors who were Freddie Shepherd and Douglas Hall, do we stay in this for the long haul and ride this through till it gets to break even, or have we done our 3 years and recognise that this is not something that's for us at this stage, and they just took that decision, and I don't take no issue with that at all because it was their money ultimately.
But it also opened up the opportunity for you as well. It's almost sometimes the kind of pivots and changes and different things open up new doors, and especially with COVID-19 at the moment, I think that will impact, or has impacted, everyone. But actually, it could also open up the doors to different things that I guess for you 20 years ago, it kind of led you on the path you're on now.
Yeah, and that's essentially what it did. It opened up an opportunity, which was presented to my boss, not myself directly, as part of a sort of a transition opportunity to make sure that the clubs continued. So John laid the path by saying, look, whoever's taking this on, I don't want any money for the clubs. You take them for £1, a notional £1. Just take them with the losses cleared, but just accept the fact that these have been trading negatively. So, and that's a slightly different prospect to a startup. The positive is it started. but it hasn't started very well. You could argue that it's done its hard yards, and now we're taking it's been given an opportunity to start again. So the trajectory could have been more positive than even it was the 3 years before when it started. So the reality was a lot of the income streams tied to the basketball particularly were linked to relationships with the football club. They fell away immediately, and we were left with the opportunity to run a club and 2 years of a 4 year, the final 2 years of a 4-year agreement with the arena, which I just had to take on. You know, they weren't going to relinquish that. So we had a very tough first 2 years trying to keep the business alive whilst seeing that contract through to then be able to sit with the arena and renegotiate, which they were very, very happy to do in their defence, and we happened to stay there as a result for another 10 years.
Wow.
Off the back of that 2-year contract. So that's 1999. We're off and running. So the first 2-3 years were survival mode, trying to understand the business properly, overcoming some of my naivety because I'm a young lad with a marketing background. I've never run a business.
How old were you at the time?
28.
Cool. The reason I ask that, because we'll have 28-year-olds watching this now. This is what I like to do. It's asking the questions that I know people will be interested in, because likewise, generally people I interact with have entrepreneurial tendencies, and they'll be gagging to know, you know. So out of interest, so you knew the business itself, you knew it was loss making, but you could see the potential. How much of it did you separate off the business side of it from the sports team performance side, or did you see them as like constantly linked?
Good question. This is a very, very simple way of putting this together. Ultimately, you can find ways to put a team together and the staffing around the team to make sure that you, on the court or on the pitch, do the right things that help roll the wheels for the rest of the business. But when it comes down to it, that really is ultimately about raising money. Yeah. To put those pieces in place. So once you've put those pieces in place, for me, I then really step away and allow the coaching staff and the players to do what they need to do, and I'll come in from time to time. But it's not I don't see that as a business in itself, if that makes sense. You know, so I then have to go away and with my team make the sales, administrate the way that needs to be administrated to make sure the events go off, manage myself and my team properly, just do all of the normal nuts and bolts stuff that you would be doing in a business. Financial management being an absolute key to that. Never make a marketing manager your GM because they like to spend money. They like to speculate to accumulate. I like to speculate to accumulate. I soon realised that I wasn't going to be able to do that. So you know, there's a step of reality in terms of what I needed to do with no investor.
Because that's what I was going to jump in, was that we spoke before about The Last Dance, the whole Michael Jordan Netflix documentary. There's always a discussion between the team and general management, and likewise in the NBA at the moment. Sorry to go off track for anyone that's not into basketball. When, for instance, Kyrie Irving was traded from the Celtics to, where did he go? I can't remember. I've gone blank. My point being, often the back management is often seen as the bad guys who either make or break up teams, because that's the whole point of what The Last Dance is all about. But actually, as being someone in that position, I guess you have to make the wider decision on the business as a whole. We need to make it last 10, 15 years. So if you've got an aging asset or assets that might not be able to perform on the court, at some point you need to make some moves because you've got the wider picture to think about. As a basketball coach myself, you always try and get the best team you've got to win games. But I guess there almost is a balance there between you have to make a profitable entity, but inherently better players will be more expensive. So it's a difficult one to manage.
Yeah, and so trying to mix all of those conditions, knowing that our ability to sell our core products, which are essentially tickets and sponsorship, which is an interesting word in itself. I mean, sponsorship ultimately is a mix of advertising and hospitality, really. So trying to sell those products when your product on the court is not winning. Does it have as big an effect in our sport as it does in football? No. The answer is no. We it's a night of entertainment, and for a good part of our match night audience, they'll be coming to a game once or twice a year, maybe. They're coming for a night out, and us winning or losing is not the be-all and end-all.
Yeah.
But for the core of the audience that have been coming for years and years, it's super important. And what comes with that in the Northeast as well is it's not just about winning, it's about putting the effort in, being entertaining, not looking like you're just turning up to pick up a wage, etc., etc. They've got to have some passion behind them,
Yeah.
So as long as we're ticking those boxes, we're okay. But it's sport is very, very unpredictable. That's why you can bet on it, and you never know what's going to happen week to week, month to month. Trying to control that tempo is ultimately dictated by how much money you can raise to put into the team in the first place to make sure you're competitive. But it still doesn't guarantee winning.
Yeah.
Football's always use football as an analogy because it's what people in the UK understand. On any given night, Bristol Rovers could beat Man United. It doesn't happen very often, but the team budgets certainly do not correlate.
No, it's right.
And the same applies with us. So.
Oh, cool. So as a seamless kind of segue then, how would you describe how the team evolved? And we'll almost link this to like a good leadership kind of question. So when almost did Fab get involved and almost the journey through starting to win? Does that make sense? And then you keeping it up? Do you want to kind of talk us through that journey?
Yeah. So I took the club over in '99. We won our first trophy in 2005. And Fab joined the club in 2001 and became coach in 2002. So we had 3 seasons pretty much where Fab was finding his way in a discipline that was completely new for him because he was a player that became a player coach. And we were coming out of a bad patch, the early phase of trying to get the club to break even. Essentially, it certainly lost a bit of money in the first 2 years, and I've managed to over the years retrace that back. So ultimately, over the span of the 20 years, we're in at least a break-even stroke, small profit-making scenario. So I suppose the two of us were both going up the learning curve in the early 2000s. Got to a point in that first season where we won 2004-05, where I was able to put a reasonable team budget together, and Fab was able to put the best team out that he felt he needed to put out for that money, without overreaching ourselves, because in our sport that happens a lot. You know, a team will really go 1 year to try and win everything. Will overshoot, and teams have folded in the past doing that. You know, the businesses have just disappeared. So yeah, we got that first team right, and I think we just did a job from there on of tweaking the keeping a core of players and just almost tweaking around the edges of that group. And obviously the group over what is now 15, 16 years has changed and changed and changed and changed, and now we've changed with Fab as well, because Fab left in September. But somehow in the midst of all of that, we've won 25 trophies, which is, you know, I look back on now, and we've had a lot of time here in this period to reflect. And I just, you know, I suppose I'm in quite a unique position, as is Fab and as some of the players that have been at the club through that position, in that I don't know too many people in team sports that have won that much. And it's hard to try and explain what keeps you motivated to keep winning at all costs like that. But you know, I have to say, in large measures, that comes back to Fab and his just never-ending drive.
Because linked to that, so just for a lot of people won't know his backstory, and you'll know it a hell of a lot better than I do. Do you want to just give people like a flavour of where he's from, how he grew up, and almost, you know, because it's a big part of the story. And then in a second, I'll ask you about how almost, because he's like almost a natural born leader. I know he talks in schools, but actually it's almost the impact that can have on a business. But just for people that don't know who he is, would you be able to give him like a 30-second?
Yeah. So Fab by name is Fabulous Flournoy. That's his name. That's his true name, Fabulous. And he grew up in the Bronx, which in itself, with a male with a name like Fabulous, would no doubt make it difficult. So his whole history growing up in New York became about getting engaged with the sport of basketball quite late on for him, about 14, 15 years of age, because he found out that he could get a pair of shoes from the coach of the club, a pair of basketball shoes if he turned up and played. From there, he went to got himself out of New York via basketball into the college system, junior college, and then McNeese State University in Texas. Got his degrees, and then moved into professional basketball. Moved to Birmingham, UK in '94, I think, and then played until he was 46. Yeah, literally, until last September, he's broken pretty much all records in the league in this country. Got an MBE along the way, a Commonwealth Games bronze medal with England, because by this time he received his passport and was playing for England, and was, to cap it all, in September last year offered an assistant coach role at the Toronto Raptors in the NBA, the team that had just won the NBA championship in the July before.
It is an incredible kind of story, but almost based on that, because I don't know the guy. Like I've trained against just when you needed spare players. Like I played against Darius and different things, and that's interesting. But actually, I don't know Fab. But as a person, what was he like, and what were his like kind of character traits?
He had many and varied, actually. It could be very, very light-hearted, very, very free-spirited, but at the same time, when a job needed to be done, very, very focused. Players would tell you of 3 and 4 hour video sessions where he would labour a point, to the nth degree, just to really get across how important a specific area of the game was. You know, he knew they got it third time, but he would tell them 50 or 60 times.
But I think, you know, that's almost some of the links between business and sports. It's the behaviors, it's the things that you do that actually make a big difference. And it was almost just, you know, I always like to learn from people when I can, and I'll ask you later about kind of good advice. But it was just, you know, his story is quite incredible, but it's also interlinked massively with the Eagles kind of story. So that's why I kind of wanted to ask. So as of, I guess now, if we could put it this way, so the Eagles have become arguably the Northeast's most successful ever sports team. Won all these trophies, you know, a few thousand people at every game. You now have your own kind of community arena. Do you want to tell people about the arena? Because then in a second, I'll explain why I think it's so good. But almost, you know, the journey to actually having your own venue, and it's a good venue as well. I'm sure that was a big, you know, leap, a big thing to achieve for the club.
Yeah. So, so as we're taking this journey of trying to make sure the club survives, to then getting into a number of years there where it was in more of a sustainable position, we're starting to win. We recognise that at some point here, this is still a broken business model, because it doesn't work if there isn't a venue to hire, number one, or controlling your own rights. There are elements of our income, our potential income streams that we're missing, including on a match night, we don't get any of the secondary spend, because that would go to the landlord of the building that we were hiring. So ultimately, to complete the project and to leave the club in safe hands almost, because, you know, I'm just the captain of the ship for now, and there'll be another one comes along after me, as there was before me. We as a business and a team realised that we needed to build our own, if we possibly could, or at least try to build our own, try and work out what it would take. How do we get this thing over the line? So we started, Sam and I started that journey probably as early as 2008-9.
Wow.
It did actually happen at the same time as we were making the move from the arena to Northumbria University. We didn't know if it was going to go anywhere or where it was going to go, but it started nearly 10 years out.
Because what's the capacity on seating?
Just short of 3,000 seats.
Wow. And I've been there many times on game night, and it is incredible, but also it's the fact that it's your venue. And then I guess from your point, from almost a business kind of management point of view, I imagine owning and running a business that owns an actual venue, it brings a lot more complexity to the model. Does that make sense? So you have to learn how to deal with crowds and deal with COVID-19 and deal with food and with suppliers and stuff. And how did you almost find that transition?
Very difficult. So we're still working on it, I would say. So part and parcel of that evolution, just to explain the way the businesses are set up, because it's more than one business now. So you have the club as the original business that took over in 99. We set up a charity in 2007, and all of the community work that was previously taking place within the club was moved into the charity, and the staff that were involved in charity in the community work. And this third phase, as we see it, the arena, sits in the charity, not the club. So it's part of the foundation. Lots of different reasons behind that. So basically, we've gone from one business to essentially two, what now feels like three. All have their discrete disciplines, mm-hmm. and all need individuals that we've recruited in to take care of those different disciplines. Mm-hmm.
Because one of the
like any
things,
business, I can and don't need to know everything. And Sam equally as chief exec of the foundation doesn't need to know everything. We're both very good micromanagers, that said, and we're learning not to be. It's difficult, but for any business to grow, as you know yourself, you have to delegate.
because one of the things that I remember talking to Sam that almost got me excited, just because for me business is like a big puzzle, and it's how for some reason I'm quite good at spotting the opportunity with stuff. And it was when, if suddenly you're looking at revenue streams from a business and it just happens to relate to a venue, you've got car parks, but you've got hospitality hire, you've got corporate events, you've got weddings, you've got comedy gigs, you've got music gigs, you've got boxing. And actually one of my former guests is a boxer from Middlesbrough called Joe Mofosa, and he fought at Newcastle Arena. Eagles Community Arena. But my point is, it's almost, I think it's incredible, just in terms of the potential that you have. Is, it might take a while to get up to speed, but it's just, I get excited just thinking about it, because I love just thinking about what you could do with it and the potential. But then also, because you touched on the community foundation, it's the fact that most people won't know that you work with some like 90 schools.
Or more, double.
Wow. Okay.
200. Yeah.
I've been underselling it. Okay. So you work at say 200 schools. But one of the big things which got me was that, because I play and coach basketball as well, as you know, but talking to everyone else, was that some of my players coach some of your junior teams, because there's a really nice hierarchy to kind of teach leadership as it goes through. And I remember calling in, I think it was on a Saturday, when you have the juniors. I forgot whether it's got a CVL, is it?
The Central Venue League, yeah.
And one of the things that got me, but it's also part of the reason why I love basketball so much, is that, so I'm part of a team called the Griffins, which is arguably part of the Eagles, but anyway, and we've got a good club, but one of our junior teams, I don't know if they're under 10s or whatever age group it was, we're playing against other youngsters from the region, but one of them in particular, he didn't even have shorts, he was playing in tracksuit bottoms and like a jumper or something. But what I love about basketball, but it's also what I love about the Community Foundation, for one, it's very inclusive, but there's no barrier to entry. Almost anyone can play, if that makes sense. But then the fact that in different communities, basketball is a great way to engage with people, be part of a team, learn something that might not be as financially, well off as others. But almost we don't discriminate. And I think the Eagles kind of Community Foundation does hell of a lot of stuff with good community people and teams and interests that I don't know if you get enough credit for that. But it's just, I think you do a hell of a lot in the kind of region. And then likewise, I think one of the chats we've had in the past is that I would like businesses to know more and understand more about all the good stuff that you actually do. Because if you're based in Blythe, for instance, pick anywhere, there'll be 5 or 10 schools in that local area that you're helping poor people in their local area, that I think there's a really good link with business that I think, we could hopefully play off and, do more with to really help both the team and the foundation and that kind of thing. So on kind of that kind of topic, do you, as a business yourself, do you find it difficult to engage with other local businesses, or how do you normally kind of go about it?
We do as much as we can with what is effectively too small a staff base. So we certainly need to be engaging more with local business and and getting them to understand what it is that we're about. I think we were just on the threshold of that pre-COVID in terms of settling the business down, in terms of the new part being the arena and all of the different events that, rather luckily we've had an unbelievable run since we opened in terms of all of the different types of events that we've held at the venue since it opened. That prior to opening, we didn't have a long list of events ready to go. We were apart from Eagles home games and the sports delivery that we knew we were going to be delivering. So we've been juggling balls. We, as you said, to be able to better communicate with the community what that second part of the business does, which is the foundation's community outreach work, which we've been doing for 20 years now. The club you play for, we set up in, I'm going to say 2000, when Benfield Centre for Sport was built. The gym on the front and the 2 courts at the back. That was our first club. It was the first club we set up. You fast forward to today, and there's over 30 sites that we operate clubs and sessions out of across Tyne Wear and South East Northumberland. Why do we do that? We had to help to try and build an infrastructure for junior basketball, because you go back to when I took the club over, it really didn't exist in the Northeast. There were 1 or 2 individuals doing lots of great work. One of them moved away, so there was just the same infrastructure that you have in rugby and football and cricket. You didn't see in basketball. So, and actually nationally you don't see it. So, but we felt for the club to survive long term and to build a real playing market for the sport of any size, we needed to engage. So my first employee wasn't a marketing manager or a business development manager. It was a basketball development officer. That was where the first investment of money.
Is that great?
Yeah, I mean, we needed to build a market that was particular to our product. So
I joke because Graham's my old coach. I played with Graham. It was just a separate anyway.
Yeah.
But no, so, but I just it's the kind of thing that with, like, I've offered in the past, and especially now, obviously you all get busy doing stuff, but I think, I'll definitely help with anyway I can. Just, it's how, like, when I do, we're both marketers in many ways, although I'm by training an engineer, but I'm passionate about the subject. And when you're trying to sell or promote any business, you always want an element of brand building, culture, vision, values, what you're about, what's at your core, and you have that with the foundation. And then you match that with commercial things like ticket sales. And again, but the business model I think you have, if you want to call it that, I think is very, very, very good. It takes, as it takes years to kind of build. And then pre-COVID, but still now, I especially with the arena, I can see really good things happening over the next kind of 2, 3, 5 years. Just, imagine the difference when you get, say maybe a big name sponsor, you get all the car park revenue, you get concerts there, you get weddings there, and just constant cash generation. Because again, as you said before, what that can do to then benefit the team and the players you can recruit and how you can operate and the merchandise and if I was you, I'd be really excited, which I'm sure you are. But actually, just from a business opportunity point of view, and
actually the model is you say how the building can help the team. The way we actually look at it is the building, because it's in the foundation, the building is helping the foundation to grow the sport.
Yep.
Growing the sport will help the team. Yeah. So what comes first is growing the sport and engaging more young people to play the sport from all backgrounds. We've actually prioritised the whole 20 years working in deprived communities and state schools. That's what our sport does. From the chap from the YMCA that invented the sport in the first place to today, it remains the same. That's the culture of the sport in the States and across Europe. That's where we are, and particularly pertinent talking now about it. So for that, it's absolutely exciting. And the interesting thing is, even though we're in this period where we're in lockdown and the building's closed, we're talking up lots of new events that we're booking in for the venue for next year. Lots of new things as well, things that we haven't done already, and some really high profile events that show that we've moved on a stage again. So plenty to look forward to.
Awesome. So in every interview I ask people 2 questions, and it's the same for everyone, and it has its own separate section on my website, and I clip all this up. So I basically pick the best bits and I put it on YouTube and share it on LinkedIn and stuff. So for yourself, What's the best piece of advice you've ever had?
Oh my goodness. Oh dear, that's a good question. Oh, you want me to answer that straight away?
Yes.
Piece of advice I've ever had. I'm not sure anyone specifically told me this. It probably goes back to my mum, to be honest. But I've always had the outlook that says don't let anybody tell you you can't do it. And it doesn't matter what it is. Don't if there's an obstacle there, just remove the obstacle. Find solutions. Don't find problems. So, but ultimately, don't let anyone tell you you can't do something.
No, I think that's good, and it's true on so many levels. It's part of the reason why I used to think it was a working class thing and it was a chip on my shoulders, but maybe not. It was when you had teachers that tell you you're not good enough, and it's just like this fuel that burns you. And then likewise, for entrepreneurs, for business, there'll be many times over the years when things might have looked bleak, and you're like, do we call it quits? And it's that incessant drive to kind of keep going. So no, I think that's good, and it's also very inspirational. Again, using the fab analogy, anyone from anywhere can go on and do incredible things. So I think that's class. And then related to this, if you were to give advice to your younger self, and it can be any age, any part of your career, you said before about the guy that just started in business, what would it be?
Do a few courses on financial management.
That's a very valid point, because again, I see people that they want to launch a startup or they want to do whatever, but they might not be as tight on costs as I think they should be. And it's learning your craft, and so I think that's actually a very good, simple but very good one, which is applicable to every business at every size. Doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah, I think I don't know what the latest stat is in terms of businesses that fell within the first couple of years. My view on that has always been, in the period from 99 to date, our business failed on 2 or 3 occasions, but I found a way to revive it. That makes sense. The first 2 years were really rocky. It would have been very easy just to call it a day and not find a way to get an overdraft, or not find a way to find a loan, or whatever it may be, just to keep the thing moving. So in me, it was the number one, the remove all the obstacles trait. But equally, if the financial management knowledge hadn't also kicked in, it wouldn't have made any difference. I can remove all the obstacles in the world, but if I can't get the finances under control, eventually it will still go wrong.
No, I think it's spot on. So I always, again, offer to people, is there anything you want to plug? Is there anything you've got going on? Like, is the season going to pick up again? That kind of thing.
So I'm on the positive side. I really hope, if I'm looking at where we are today, that the best case scenario is probably October. But it really, obviously, is very, very reliant on what happens this next sort of 12 to 14 weeks.
And that's for the BBL games?
That's for the men's BBL games and the women's WBBL games. Mm-hmm. So we also run a women's team in the top league, both at our venues. So on the note of the 2 clubs, we need support. We absolutely need support. The easiest way, I would say, to do that next season is come and join us in hospitality. You can buy 1 seat, you can buy a table of 10, you can come once, you can come to all the home games. It's flexible, but I think that's the easiest way, and it's the best way we've found up to now to engage new business to come and see what we're all about on a match night. So
because I completely agree with that. That when one of the big things I see with a lot of corporate events is that I think either the company that's hosting people tries too hard, and actually it's a bit awkward. Often, if you get so a black tie dinner, there's nothing wrong with them, but if you're brutally honest, not everyone wants to be there. It's a bit stuffy. And actually, just a lot of the Eagles games, it's a good night out, nothing too smart, couple of beers, and it's a nice, relaxed night. And I remember the first kind of Eagles game that I took my parents to and my wife, and they never watch basketball, but they had a good time, and that's the important thing. And again, one of the things that I love about the Eagles games, it's the links that are quite clever, both with local businesses, like there's a thing called Chuck a Duck, which basically is it £1? And then anyway, it's for the kids, but it's really kind of good fun, and it's just there's a lot of stuff that goes on. And then there's also a separate thing which is called the Mexican Hat Dance, which is for Zapatista Burrito Bar. But it's clever branding that if I owned Zapatista Burrito Bar, it makes perfect sense. But it's all very nicely done. My point is, it's a good night out, and I think it's very reasonably priced. And I think you should, if you ever want to host anyone, do it, and I'll kind of set you up with tickets and stuff.
So and I would just say equally, from a CSR point of view, the great work that the foundation's doing in the community. We have ways to deliver opportunities that mix both match night and CSR, and it's all right the way through the piece. It's all very family based, very it's about youth and it's about opportunity.
Cool. Well, I appreciate it is what time at night, so it's 20 to 7, so it's getting on a little bit. But no, it's been lovely to kind of catch up. I haven't seen you for probably 4 months, just being locked indoors. But great to catch up. I am a big fan of the Eagles and the arena, and say hi to Sam for me. And I love what you do. I love what you do at schools and the community. I love watching the games. I love playing the games. And it's just long may it continue, and stay in touch.
Thanks, Steve. Really appreciate it.
No worries. Cheers, Paul.
Thank you.